There we are. That is in fact 15 seconds. It seems sometimes like 15 minutes, but it is in fact 15 seconds. Right, okay, we'll jump straight in. First of all, I'd like to, if you could, it would be fantastic if you could just give us maybe a quick reflection, maybe of some of the, or an example of the things you're involved with in terms of leaders doing it right with innovation. So an example of your experience in what you do, just to give us a flavor of how it's connected to what you do. Maybe, Vladimir.
I start?
Yeah.
Right. I've mentioned this briefly in my talk. When it comes to the leaders, and I think it's a very important subject, and it becomes even more important if you look at different countries in the world, which I have quite the privilege of being able to do. And the leadership in Europe, in Western Europe and Eastern Europe, and the leadership in Asia is quite different. And especially in relation to the whole conversation about the innovation ecosystems and how to come up with new solutions and how to deploy new solutions. We sort of assume in the West that if you just put enough of people together and you give them all the opportunities to talk, to mingle, something will emerge. But that we often forget is not going to be the case in Asia and in Asian societies, which are much more conservative. So in that case, a lot of careful guidance is necessary, and we don't normally expect people just to come up with ideas, to challenge the authority, to challenge senior people. That doesn't really happen. And for me now, the most important vehicle of working with that is what I've mentioned, the Future City Leaders Summit, which is based in Hong Kong and has the major spin-off into China, but also in lots of cities in Southeast Asia. And that's exactly what we're trying to do over there. Connect the established authorities like the Asian Development Bank, World Bank, these larger players over there who are interested in the longer-term change, especially in regard to urban development, and connect them with younger people who work with their own companies, with startups, with innovation systems, and of course the existing cities.
So it's almost a real collaboration. It's putting different entities together.
Correct.
And getting those conversations going. Maybe in entities that are maybe not always in the same room together, but actually pushing them together and getting the conversations going.
Correct.
And getting them thinking. Hanna.
Well, coming from an innovation company owned by the city of Helsinki, this is a task that we are challenged with, I guess, every day. One thing we've, of course, also, we share that bringing people together and especially kind of having this sharing of ideas and examples between different cities who maybe in the past were seen as competitors, I think there's been a great value. But coming to maybe a more concrete thing that relates more directly to the work we do in my team is the work City has been doing on open data and learning how to be a platform for innovations, not just for internal innovations in the city, but also for third parties. And that's kind of the path we've been on for a long time, and we have quite good political backing for that. So I think that's a good success story. And the fact that the city has taken the carbon neutrality targets for 2035 has a very concrete action plan for that. That also helps to kind of find a focus on the challenges for innovation. Yeah,
and it also seems from the outside perspective that you're doing it very well indeed. Mm-hmm. So very good, going very in a forward direction. Earlier on, you mentioned working with other cities, other towns around Finland. How is that developing?
Well, I think we've been working on that for 8 years now. First, maybe more on the European level, because sometimes it's harder to work with your neighbor cities, I guess. But now, the last 6 years or so, we've really strengthened the collaboration with the 6 largest Finnish cities and have good experiences from that as well. And then, of course, we don't have to do the work alone. I think this is something that cities have recognized, and that's why this Open and Agile Smart Cities network of cities has been launched, and they are becoming a platform for such city collaboration.
Fantastic. Alexander, share with us.
Yeah. I'm thinking in terms, as you're mentioning, in terms of leadership, I think cities has to take the leadership for everything because they are responsible for most of the most important infrastructure that runs the city. And so from my point of view, I'm running a research project at the Institute of Technology in Stockholm called Smart Streets. And I would say our clients are city planners and traffic planners that are going to solve traffic in cities. So how will they do that? Do we have the cities, or do we have the streets that actually do the job? Or do we have streets that are outdated? I think so. So I think we need a totally new standard of streets in the future. New standards of
as you're explaining that, I'm just thinking how easy or how difficult is it to not so much influence but persuade to deal with city leaders on these kind of projects? Is it is it a stubborn kind of mindset? Is it easy to influence them, to help them point them in the right direction?
I just talked to Hufvudstadsbladet about this, so it will be in the paper tomorrow.
Right, well, we're not going to wait here until the printing happens tomorrow. We'd like an answer now.
Okay, so answering your question, like I really think that cities can change their system and by their leadership go and this is a competition as well between cities. So we know Oslo, for example, are taking away all the car traffic in the city center. Copenhagen did it just recently. We in Stockholm, we try to keep up. I mean, there's so much competition between cities, and I think that inspires leaders to take a step further. And when you read a city plan, when you read the policy for every city, it could be New York or Los Angeles or Hong Kong, Singapore or Helsinki. You have all the right words in there. I mean, you have sustainable, you have environmental, you have livability, walkability. Yeah. So I think now we have the winds in the right direction, and we can just go for that and try to see how can we change practice. What rules do we need? What practices? What platforms do we need? What streets do we need? What infrastructure do we need to solve that vision that is, I think, already there? Okay,
so on behalf of City of Helsinki, how easy is it to work with other cities close by? Oslo, Stockholm?
I think sharing thoughts and ideas is easy, but like you mentioned, there's often this race to implement a certain thing, and then we maybe don't put in place the way of measuring the actual impact, like how did this certain change impact the economy or the climate issues and so forth. So then when you start looking at replicating such great solutions to elsewhere, it's a bit hard to evaluate what were the actual costs. And sometimes cities, when you go to that level, it's a bit, they're a bit hesitant to share the sums of money they put into it, and maybe the disappointments that were there because they are so busy competing and having the kind of success stories that they want to share.
Just to mention, my consultancy Spacescape, we did the bicycle strategy for Oslo. And so we did a lot of data gathering. We're asking the people of Oslo, like, what kind of bicycle city do you want? And it was so much demand for better bicycle infrastructure in Oslo. And going through the process, they decided to put 1 billion euros in bicycle infrastructure in the next couple of 10 years. So I think when you have the data, when you have the arguments, you can really get these massive changes and decisions.
Okay, so basically the people of Oslo, they had a bike system scheme. It was working, but they were very unhappy, clearly, with the standard of the actual bike. Interesting. Vladimir, you spoke earlier on about the different collaborations you've been doing. You were in Sarajevo last week, is that right? Tell us about places like Sarajevo that are similar to those kind of cities that you've seen that are doing things correctly, doing things right.
I agree with Alexander. If you look into the plans, the urban plans, very often at the digital and transformation plans of the cities, they do have all the right words over there. Of course, the devil is in the details and in the implementation. And that brings me back to the conversation we just had during lunch. There are certain things we can engineer, but in the end, it's about the adoption and the usage and the change of behavior, and that is the elephant in the room, especially the further east you travel, and east starts already with Eastern Europe. And yes, we can see that Oslo and London and Stockholm and many other cities ban, the entrance of cars to the city centers. They introduce congestion charges. But I cannot really see that happening in any nearest future, in my hometown or further east in Asia. And I'm very curious how much time we have there, again, left, if you believe in 12 years, the forecast, before that grassroots movement will come from people. Well, actually, we don't want to use that many cars. And to be honest, I don't see the good things happening over there. In the tighter megapolises, of course, the public transportation system is there, but lots of modern Asian towns, they are built around cars. You go to Sarajevo, you tell people you can't drive your car anymore. That would not fly really, really well.
Yeah, but you also pay for food.
Sorry?
You pay for food, like you pay for clothes. Why not pay for road use or parking?
No, I agree with that. I think that in most of the countries, the costs of using the car are extremely low. I think using private car should be something on the verge of not being affordable to a lot of people. I think that's the right way to do it. But there has to be an alternative. And that's the frequent problem over there. In many cities, there is no equivalent, adequate alternative in terms of public transportation. And you can't fix everything with, this micromobility means. You can't deploy 1 million bikes, 1 million scooters, but that will not address everybody's needs.
Yeah, I think the congestion charging, or rather, should we say, decongestion charges,
Yeah,
because that's how they talk about it now in the States. It's not that you are supposed to be punished to drive. It's because you can pay for accessibility. You pay for the access to roads, the access to the city. If you have a market pricing on parking, then we have solved parking issues, because it's the supply and demand thing that could be supported by digital platforms, that you can see how much does these parking places, how much do they cost, how much availability do we have, and so we can get the functional system by market pricing, I think.
But it's also like what time frame are we planning for, and is it the autonomous vehicles, will they increase the amount of car use or not, and all these, there are so many things impacting the future, so it's sometimes hard for cities to also know that where do they set kind of that this is the future we are driving for, or how do you see it?
I think the autonomous cars will probably come, and but maybe it's easier to have them drive goods before people, or public transport may be easier. You have a self-driving subway in Copenhagen, and we are testing self-driving buses in Helsinki, as you mentioned, and in Stockholm. So there are many things that could be. I think one thing that we could do with this technology would to be enhance the quality of life in cities, which has been so elegantly put in a new report I really recommend you to read, which is called Blueprint for Autonomous Urbanism, from a American organization called NACTO. And they just describe, like, when we get autonomous vehicles that do not text while they drive, do not drive drunk, so we can have a safer city. And if we have a safer city with slower speeds and so on, we could have much more things happening in the street. We could have kids playing in the street and so on. So we should have that vision to drive the technology.
Interesting take, but I don't know whether you were here yesterday. There was a gentleman called Andrew Keane. Were you here yesterday? Perhaps not. Andrew, we were here for Andrew Keane's last keynote, which was so intriguing. He was almost sharing the notion of, good cities, great cities, are maybe meant to be spontaneous cities where you're not quite sure, things are not perfect, things are not exactly how they should be. The human element is in there. There are, things happen unplanned, giving it some, flavor and character. So it was interesting to hear his point of view. Actually, something which I'd like to ask, I'm going to actually ask the other members of the panel, is something you'll be sharing a little bit later on in your speech a little bit later on. But the question is, actually, I'll ask you, the audience, as well. So 3 options. What kind of a future, what kind of a city would you like to live in? Would it be, number one, an eco-city? All right, so everything to do with eco ideas, green, clean, fresh, healthy. A techno-city. Okay, number two, a techno-city. A city where everything is run by tech. Everything gives us, our lifestyle is basically based on everything pretty much on our mobile phones, on our apps. Or a free city where we get more choices, we can do more as we wish. Okay, so eco-city, techno-city, or free city. Think about that for a moment. What's it going to be? What's your opinion on that one? So, eco-city, techno-city, or free city? You say nothing yet, because you're going to talk about it a lot later on. What do you think?
Okay.
I think you cannot have eco-city these days without having the technology. I mean, that's where we get the efficiency, the emission cuts, new sources of energy, smart grids and so forth. I think also technology can enable a lot of freedom for us, freedom of choice. Through standards, we can have a better variety of services and so forth. So I think it's very hard to separate it.
Yeah,
but Helsinki wants to be the most functional city in the world. So.
Which brings in together sort of all those elements, and also the work. I've heard the work-life balance is very, and also you're the happiest nation on earth. Is that right?
Yeah.
As I can see. Okay, so you just don't show it much, which is fine. That's fine. Inside, you're screaming and shouting with joy. Anyway, Vladimir, tell us.
I agree with Hanna. It's difficult to choose one thing, and I don't really think that we should really choose one over the other. You know, in all the city models, you have the combination of things. So eco, free, and tech would be my choice combined together. What is the right proportion? I think that's a very good question. You know, what's the right way to do it? And I wanted to remark on the point you made about the predictability versus unpredictability. I haven't listened to the keynote yesterday, but I recognize the argument, and that's the famous argument of Rem Koolhaas, the Dutch architect, who was in the beginning of the story about smart cities arguing, well, you know, this is our domain, you know, we've been building cities for decades and, you know, ages, and what the work we've been doing is, you know, dumb cities, but, you know, that's essentially the beauty and the magic of the city, the amount of opportunities, unpredictability, everything that is happening over there. So of course, if you come from that angle, you'll be naturally concerned about technology really regulating everything. And of course, you can extend it, you know, this threat even further. There's this excellent book from Shoshana Zuboff called Surveillance Capitalism, which very nicely summarizes where we're now standing with the abundance of technology which is tracking everything, behavior, consumption, you name it, which is the outcome of the smart city story. And how that is going to work, we clearly see in the world. There are like completely different ways to regulate it. Again, from the Asian Chinese approach to what's happening in the States about facial recognition. You've seen the results of the poll for the buildings during the Kent's presentation. I think the actual mixes will be very, very different depending on where you go.
Alexander, you got 2 minutes to give us your take without going too much into your speech.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so
just give us almost a teaser. What you're about to say now, hopefully, will intrigue everybody here to listen more to your talk later.
And not leave and go home.
Well, they won't leave. Will you leave? Okay, maybe they will leave. I don't think so.
Okay. I mean, so these three cities that you mentioned are scenarios. That is an important distinction because a scenario can have both good and bad outcomes. It could be a possible future which we can have. And so these three scenarios I have described in my book. Has the title Closer Together. This is the future of cities. And so there I described the driving forces behind what kind of city can we get if we get these trends going so we can have these different scenarios. And I totally agree. Probably there will be a mix. But the question is, what if we have an energy crisis? Maybe we have to go to the eco-city scenario. So this is the thing. These images that I will show you, this is a teaser, in my talk, have really spurred a conversation, especially among politicians, to understand what city do we want.
I was just going to say, absolutely, all this on how it's going to eventually turn out in whatever city depends on naturally the decisions of the leaders making these important decisions on exactly what kind of a, any of those three scenarios or a mix, and the percentage of those three options is based on the decisions they make. So
Yes.
depending on what they want and maybe how they listen to the people that actually of the cities themselves.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. Do you want a tunnel under Helsinki?
are you asking me that? I would
It
love
could
a
be a
tunnel. I would
quite
love a
thing.
tunnel under Helsinki. In fact, I'll give you one example, a very quick example, because it just reminded me when you said tunnel. So in Malta, in fact, those of you that have been to Malta will know that Maltese islands, three little islands, Malta, Comino, and another sister island called Gozo, a beautiful, not built up at all, very relaxing. It's where most of the Maltese go for their holidays. Very different from the built-up Malta island. They're planning, the idea is there's going to be a tunnel underneath the water from Malta to this, beautiful unbuilt island. Lots of controversy. Naturally, number one, if the tunnel is put in place, there'll be more traffic on the island, there'll be more business on the island, there'll be more work for the people on the island. That's all good. But the other side of the coin, that island over the next 10, 20, 30 years will not be the island it has been for hundreds of years. Unkept, very peaceful, idyllic. So.
But that's not the challenge for Helsinki.
No, it's not the challenge of Helsinki, but it basically by doing that, who wants that? I'm sure the government wants to do that in Malta, but the people of those two little islands, the controversy and the feedback is very two-sided. So who do they listen to? If in Helsinki, a tunnel here in Helsinki, who do you listen to?
The people,
of course. Ladies and gentlemen, I think you're agreeing with me, quite a productive and a healthy discussion that's given us lots of food for thought. I'm intrigued really to hear more from our panelists a little bit later on. Please put your hands together for our panelists, Vladimir, Hanna, and Alexander. Thank you so much.